All right, guys, welcome to the second webinar in a series called the 5-Week Body Language Mastery Course. My name is Joshua Pellissier, and I am the author of the Tao of Badass, which is great. I almost said The Modern Gentleman there, which is not my book, but I do like that book. So I am putting on this 5-week Body Language Mastery course to teach as much as I can about the 5 pillars of sex appeal, which we'll go over a little bit today. And today's topic is a really exciting one. It took me a lot of trial and error to figure out. No one really teaches it, in my experience, very well, or at least whenever I was learning it, no one was teaching it very well. There are a lot of brilliant guys teaching stuff now, but not whenever I started. So I developed my own system and understanding of how it is to attract women in the way that I want to teach you today, and I'm really excited to reveal that to you. This is going to be about between an hour and a half, depending on how much I ramble and depending on how many questions I get. If you do have a question, there should be a way for you to sort of raise your hand digitally. I'm not sure if you see that or not, but you click the little hand raise button and I can talk to you, or you can type in your question right there within the window, and I should be able to see it and address it and answer it. So anytime that you have a question, just let me know. By doing one of those two things, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I can. I may not be able to get to it until the end of the webinar. So if you do have a question, type it in, and then later on, afterwards, I'll go back and I'll make sure that I get everyone's questions answered properly. I'm probably gonna see some people trickling in here, which is fine because I have about 5-minute intro here that I'm gonna be going over, just sort of catching everyone up to speed from what we talked about last week, and just kind of briefing over it. So I'll go ahead and get started on that now. Again, this is my course here is called the 5-Week Body Language Mastery Course. And yes, this is an awesome presentation in case you were wondering. I do like doing these things. All right, so we're going to go over the 5 pillars of sex appeal. This is the second of 5 different pillars. The first one we went over last week was eye contact. There's a lot of concepts involved in eye contact. I'm sure that everyone was kind of blown away by how much material there was. This one is available for replay now, so if you do want to replay it, watch a replay of it and take a break and everything, and sort of control the controls of the actual presentation, then you can go to a link that I'll drop to you guys later on. It should be sort of somewhere in the window in which the vicinity that you're at right now. So last week was on eye contact. It's a brilliant topic, a lot of really cool stuff. We went over eye accessing cues. We went over different eye contact games, different ways to project your state onto other people, different ways to control your state to make sure you didn't get emotional or nervous whenever you're going into a high impact setting like a bar or a nightclub or something where there are lots of beautiful women. And we also taught a little bit about how to read someone else's eyes, how to tell whether or not they're lying, they're attracted, they're trying to hide emotion, whatever, to sort of give you a peek into the mind of a woman in real time as you're talking to her. I use these things daily, and still to this day I use them daily. So it's a really awesome concept for eye contact. If you want a refresher on that, you can just go back to last week's webinar and you can watch it anytime you want to. It's available to you forever. As long as the internet exists, that will be available to you. So you can check that out. Today we're going to go over touch. It's a really amazing bit of content. I think you're going to like it a lot. It's one of the most crucial components to attracting beautiful women that exists in the world right now. And especially when I was going through this and I was trying to figure out what the main highest impact components were to attracting women, touch was, it was probably top 3 of those things. So I'm really excited to be able to go over some of that stuff with you today. Next week, we're going to go over negative body language. That's a component or an idea that you can attract women by giving, basically facing your body toward them or turning away from them at certain times when certain things happen, and it will create, if you do it in the right combination, will create a massive amount of attraction and sexual escalation. So we'll go over that. We'll go over psychological space, which I'm happy to talk about because it isn't talked about a lot within this industry and within my people who study with me and teach with me. It's a really well-guarded concept. It's basically, quote-unquote personal space, how to enter someone's world without, getting rejected or having them back away or feeling unwelcome. how to sort of become part of their world, or even have them step into your world, which is really what we're going to be talking about with psychological space. How to read their psychological space, their boundaries, and have them step into yours, so that they sort of drop the personality they had before. Maybe like it was a cocky personality. Maybe it was sort of bitchy. Maybe it was a little bit fed up with guys, or cynical. And then when they enter your space, into your area, they sort of drop all that and they become a different person around you, someone that you enjoy being around. So how to sort of set that frame with psychological space. And then finally, the 5th week, we're going to go over dominant body language, which is how to show core confidence and control and power through your body language. It's one of the first things women look for when they look at a man, to figure out whether or not they're going to be attracted to that guy. So dominant body language is one of the key components, and I'm really happy to be able to teach it on here. So today, again, we're going to go over touch. It's a lot of information again. I'm going to be going over these different, they're not really slides, but kind of during this presentation, these different components. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to post a question. But I may not get to it till a little bit later on, but that's okay. I'll answer all the questions at the end. And usually I open up the lines and talk to people, one-on-one, actually over the internet. So it's cool. You can actually have a conversation with me and ask me a couple questions and tell me what you think and give me some feedback. So I'd love to hear that. I have a lot of different pieces of content that not just go along with this course, but they go along with the Tao of Badass. And it took me it didn't take me a long time to produce the Tao of Badass as a book, but it took me years and years and years to come up with the understanding that it took for me to really get women, to get what actually attracts them. And for a long time, I was, and when I say a long time, I mean majority of my life, probably up until I was around 24, I thought it was just hit or miss, and that you were good with women or you weren't, and I just wasn't good with women at the time, and actually had never been good with women. I had a couple of girlfriends, maybe one in high school and one briefly after, maybe one more somewhere along the line, and but it wasn't. I have no ability to attract a woman. And actually, to be honest, the first thing I did, this is kind of embarrassing, but the first thing I did whenever I realized that I didn't really know what I was doing with women is I went online and I looked up pickup lines, because I thought that, and this is, I don't know if you guys have done this before, if you've done this ever, but I was sort of naive at the time, and I thought that if I just, I had this picture in my mind of seeing this girl. I would walk into a bar, and it was, a popular bar in the town that I was in, lots of college kids there, and I'd see this girl. She was like kind of stirring a drink at the bar. It was loud. There's a club going on, an atmosphere, and she's by herself, and I'd walk up and I would say this magical thing, and she would just start laughing and talking to me, and then I couldn't even imagine what would happen after that. I just thought that I would have this magical thing that I would say, and it would all work out for me. And so I started looking up pickup lines, and I just immediately was just disgusted. I mean, not because some of them were evil, but because they were so stupid. I mean, I couldn't even do it. I didn't even try. So years went by after that, and I still thought that it was just a big sham and that no one really understood this stuff, until I started reading a little bit more psychology, and I started applying the psychology, and I came across some concepts that were mind-blowing, and it totally changed my success with women, to the point where I was dating multiple women at the same time almost overnight. It was probably about a week or two in between me being absolutely terrible with women and me completely being successful, not understanding women, but at least being successful with them. And I could, I felt like I could, 1 out of every 10 women that I tried to talk to and connect with, I would actually be able to hook up with. It was kind of nice. But as I studied more and as I applied more, I started trying to figure out whether or not other people were doing this, and I found out that there were, and I started studying other things, and I realized there's a whole world of people who have been studying this stuff, and who I wasn't alone doing this. So I started studying with people, and it quickly became, one of the best in the industry, at least from other people's point of view. I don't know if I'd call myself one of the best, but a lot of people say that they resonate with my content, and this makes a lot of sense for them. And I've gone since then to become professional dating coach, world renowned, and I've taught thousands and thousands of guys. Had a show on Sirius XM radio for a couple of years, teaching guys how to meet women, did the whole celebrity thing and went on, Today Show, all these newspapers and all that stuff. And it was great, but my passion still lies with teaching what I've learned because, I didn't know it existed until someone taught it to me. So I'm really excited to be able to teach you something really focused today, and it's all about the art of touch. So I'm going to sort of jump right into it now. And what I really want to start out with is this concept that touch is a scary thing in America. I'm not sure if you're in America or not listening to this now and watching this, but I know that for the culture of America and a lot of European cultures, save a couple that aren't like this, but touch is kind of a weird thing. It's not something you really do to someone you just met, and in fact, if you do try to do it with someone you just met, a lot of people find it kind of offensive and kind of creepy. And so what happens is people just don't even try. And there are a couple studies, and one that really fascinated me was the study of they had a cafe, and they had these two cameras. One camera was on a cafe in Italy, and one camera was on a cafe in England. And the camera in the cafe in England, they checked to see how many times men and women touched each other in casual conversation. And it was like they counted the amount of time per person. It was something like once every 45 minutes on average someone would touch in that. And then they compared that to the amount of touch that was happening in this webcam that was recording in a cafe in Italy. And the cafe in Italy, once in every 3 minutes someone was being touched. The average person would touch someone once in every 3 minutes in the Italian cafe. And it was one of two things: either Italian coffee's got ecstasy in it, which is I guess is the possibility, and then the other one, which is more than likely, is that the Italian culture is set in such a way that touch is natural. Now, in case you haven't noticed, Italian men coming to other cultures like American cultures or English cultures, they tend to sort of just destroy shit when it comes to women. I mean, they're really good with women. Women just love them. Women also love French men in a lot of different areas of the world. Not all the different areas of the world, but a lot of different areas. Love that sort of attitude, that sort of sensual attitude. And just to sort of be clear of what I mean by sensual, what I mean is appealing to the senses. I mean, their language is spoken in such a way that it appeals to the women. It's not forced. It's not strong and angry, unless it's Italian sometimes, I guess, but not very often when they're speaking to women and when they're in casual conversation. There's also another sense that's really held highly in those two cultures is touch, this sensation, this sense of feeling on your skin. And so what they do is they use that in normal conversation. They touch in normal conversation. And one of the reasons why women love men from those cultures so much is because they break through these touch barriers. But how come an Italian guy or a French guy can do it and we can't? And that's really the first thing I want to talk about. That's what I'm going to go over now. And that is, hey, you get your damn hands off her. This is George McFly from Back to the Future. If you've ever seen that movie, it's a fantastic movie. This is another, this is the classic sort of thought that a lot of guys have. It's like, oh man, what if what if I go overboard? What if I do it too much? What if she gets offended? What if she pulls away? What if what if a guy sees me and wants to beat me up? George McFly is not going to want to beat you up, but Biff could, I guess, in this case. And so it's this fear that we have that we're going to go too far, we're going to do too much, we're going to ruin our chances. And really what it comes down to is just knowing the nuances of figuring out when exactly you can and can't touch a woman, where you can and can't touch her, and how you can and can't touch her. And this is what I'm going to talk about today, in a way that's going to allow you to add touch into your everyday environment, everyday atmosphere, everyday conversation, not just with women that you're attracted to, but with everybody, and everyone will absolutely treat you differently for it. We use touch as a form of reward for us. So, when we're babies, we, our mothers will touch us and hold us. And this is something that we feel comfort from. And then as we get older, the sensation of touch is still associated to that feeling of connectedness, that feeling of comfort. And so if we can touch people more in a way that makes them feel comfortable, they will actually open up faster. It also takes the, I mean, it can shorten the sort of the time between when you first meet a woman to when you first get to bed with her. It can shorten that to hours if you know how to do touch properly. That's not my main focus here, but it is a perk to what I'm teaching you. So make sure you take notes during this webinar, and make sure you get as much as you can out of this. But don't worry about it too much. If you do want to just sit back and relax and watch, you can, because you can always replay this later. You'll have access to it forever, so it's not a big deal. But just make sure you pay as much attention as possible, because I will be taking questions now, and I won't be able to take your questions later. So this is sort of the fear that we have: this, hey, you get your damn hands off her, and that sort of drives a lot of our thought around touch. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to demystify touch a bit, and I'm going to demystify or sort of blow the door open on how many times you can and can't touch a woman when you're talking to her, and what it'll actually do for you. I suggest, though, for the next week as you do this, that before the next webinar, that you focus on just touch for the next week, and you don't try to do anything else. And every week that you learn the new sort of pillar of sex appeal, you add that into your tool belt, and you use that to attract women just that week. That's all you use. You only focus on that. You only look at it. You try to find your boundaries, and you try to move forward with it, because that's probably the best way for you to progress with this sort of information. Again, it's a lot of information, though. So it comes down to taking your hands off of her before she takes your hands off of her. So take your hand off before she does. This was sort of my motto for me, my sort of mantra. Take my hand off before she takes my hand off. Because I found that in the very beginning, one of the only things I really realized is that once she starts to pull away, it's pretty much over. If she starts to back off, if she starts to turn, if she starts to pull your hand off, she's immediately going to start to feel unattracted from that moment. And from there, you're downward spiraling. So what you want to do is know exactly when you can keep your hand on her and for how long you can, so that you take your hand off before she does. And then eventually, because you take your hand off every time, she'll trust you to touch her so much, she will be looking for a way to put your hand on her. And that's whenever you know you're sort of in the upper hand here in an interaction. That's the place that you want to be at. It's the place that you want to exist. So we're going to go over that today in great detail. But for now, I wanted to sort of throw this concept at you and let you know that sort of the general concept here, the general idea is to take your hand off before she does. So that's a really key component. So there are actually 3 different types of touch, and you have to produce them in a certain way, in a certain order, with the person that you're talking to, with the woman that you're attracted to. If you break this rule, then you will cross the touch barrier too early and too quickly, and you'll very likely get this repulsion, this pullback. It's also a really big sign to a guy who's nearby who may be protective. Let's say she's with a guy at a bar who maybe is their coworker or something, and you're talking to her and you're attracting her, and he sees you touch too long and she pulls your hand off. He's going to feel compelled to step in and stop you now, even if this has nothing to do with him, and even if there's no issue really. So it will really help solve a lot of problems that you may have whenever you're talking to women, not just with the women that you're talking to, but also with the surrounding people. So you have to win everybody over. Everyone has to feel like you are safe, comfortable, confident, and that they can lead this girl with you, not just her guy friends, but also her girlfriends as well. So a really, really crucial component. So there are 3 different types of touch. I want to go into them now. The first type of touch is called temporary touch. Temporary touch is essentially a concept that we accept touch from a stranger in small, bite-sized increments in the beginning, and only in certain places. And I'll get into where they are in a bit. But temporary touch is the first kind of touch. This is sort of the default mode for you. You should be touching everybody all the time in this mode. And temporary touch, what does that mean? Well, essentially it means you can touch someone for 1 to 3 seconds and then you take your hand off. It's not very long. It's not very long at all, in fact. It's a very, very short period of time. And again, these aren't hard and fast rules. You can break these rules, and sometimes with the proper indicators for you when you're looking at a woman, you can see which stage you're at, and I'll go into that a little bit later on. You can see which stage you can start in just by watching the way she's moving her body and watching the way she's talking to you. and how she responds to your interaction with her. I've used this concept for touch, not just with temporary touch, but with the other types of touch as well, to meet a woman. And I know this may sound kind of crazy, so I understand if it's something that's kind of unbelievable, but I actually did it in the middle of a class. I was whenever I still did field work, when I went out with guys, and I would actually demonstrate for them how to attract women right in front of them. I had one guy, one of my clients, approach this girl, and he started talking to her, and she just turned her back to him, and she's done up at a bar. He just didn't really do it right. He went in just trying to break all the rules and see if he could get through, and of course it didn't work because it doesn't really work like that. So he came back and he's like, she's not giving me the time of day. Will you go in and show me how you do it so I can watch you? And I was like, well, I can, but if I do that, then I'm not going to be around for the rest of the field night. I just if I do that, then I turn it on, and then that's the end of it. So he's like, oh no, that's cool. I know. That's totally fine. I'll just watch you. So I walk up to her, and I use a series of movements that I'm going to teach you most of today. And there's some things that you'll have to learn a little bit on your own, or not on your own, but a little bit later on in other courses that I teach. But for the most part, was using touch and frame control, psychological space, to I said hello, and then within 15 seconds we were making out. I didn't know who she was. And I know it sounds crazy, but it happened. My client was blown away, of course. My student was, and he was just like, I'll never doubt you again. And I'm glad she didn't reject me right then, because I guess it's a possibility that she could have rejected me totally right there. That would have been sort of embarrassing for me. But it worked out, and I used a lot of these series of things. It allowed me to break the rules. And once you understand the rules, you can bend them. It's kind of like the Matrix. Once you understand that there's a system to all of this, then you can bend the rules to work in your favor. And for now, you have to understand the rules. So I want you to see the rules, and then eventually I want you to start to break them. So just keep that in mind. The goal here is to break these rules eventually, but not yet. So in the beginning, you have, like I said, temporary touch. And temporary touch is when you touch a woman for 1 to 3 seconds, and then you take your hand off. So don't let it linger for longer than 3 seconds. You'll start to see that she reacts differently if you do that in the very beginning. Again, you're touching everyone like this all the time. You have to be the kind of guy that touches everybody all the time. You're just the guy who touches people. You don't want to be a touchy guy. A touchy guy is a guy who tries to go too fast and doesn't follow the rules of touch. So maybe it's a guy who starts with the second stage. So I'll go into that one now. Second stage is called lingering touch. So once you've gone past temporary touch, where you're touching for 1 to 3 seconds and then you take your hand off, you'll get to a certain point where, let me just stop jumping everywhere, where you get to a point called lingering touch. And lingering touch, if you just saw that a second ago, is where you keep your hand on them for 3 to 5 seconds. I'm going to go into when the interaction. You can tell to do this later, but for now, after you've been touching them for 1 to 3 seconds, you're doing that, they're comfortable. Eventually you get to the point where you leave it on for 3 to 5 seconds and you're in a stage called lingering touch. So once you get past lingering touch and they're comfortable with that, you move on to the third stage, which is constant touch. This is the seductive touch stage. A lot of guys start in this stage, and and to be honest, a lot of guys who start in this stage are better with women than guys who don't touch at all, because you cannot bridge the physical barrier later on if you don't touch early on. So constant touch is the latter stages, but at the same time, you don't want to jump straight into it. If you jump straight into it, then you're going to have a serious problem with the women that you're trying to attract, mainly because they're going to recoil in the beginning because you come on too strong. When someone starts in either the third stage, constant touch, or the second stage, lingering touch, when they first meet somebody, they're considered creepy. They're also considered touchy. They're considered to be a guy who comes on too strong, and a lot of women are turned off by that. So make sure you keep that in mind. So those are the 3 stages of touch: temporary touch, lingering touch, and constant touch. Now, I just sort of want to go, just to kind of let you know, constant touch is continuous touch. It's where you don't take your hands off of them. It's if you have to move your hand from her back to her leg, you're going to slide your hand from her back slowly down to her leg. This is not something you do immediately, and you'll get a little bit more information about where you can touch here in a bit. But just know that those are the 3 stages of touch. Now, I want to go over something that I believe is probably the most crucial component to understanding how to touch a woman in a masterful way that will create a massive amount of a spark of attraction and curiosity, help build that rapport and that emotional connection, and also pave the way for a very smooth transition into sexual escalation later on. And those are the different mindsets of touch. So the mindsets of a master of touch. And basically what this means is that there are different ways you can think in your head that will sort of bypass all of the what do I do now questions. If you think a certain way and you're acting from a certain place in your mind, then you won't have to even worry about what to do. You'll just naturally do the right thing. This is what helped me get so good so fast, is understanding the mindsets of touch and not just what do I do. Because if you're just wondering what to do, then you'll never be able to do it on your own and recreate the success on your own, because you always have to have someone there to tell you what to do. My goal is not to teach you just enough so that you need me. My goal is to teach you so much that you're a complete badass as women and that you have mastered these different areas of attracting women. And so I don't want you to need me. I want you to be able to do this on your own. And so I'm going to teach you everything I know, and I'm going to give you the most hard-hitting content so I know it will make a change and it will make a big difference. And this is one of those really hard-hitting pieces of content. So there are 3 different mindsets of a master of touch, and I'm going to go into those now too. And they sort of coincide with the map of interaction. Now, if you just got the Tao of Badass and you haven't read it yet, or haven't gotten around to reading it yet, the map of interaction is one of the key elements in the system. The system basically teaches that there are 4 different stages of an interaction. Attraction is the first stage, rapport is the second stage, seduction is the third stage, and then there's another stage called relationship balance after it. But the touch doesn't enter into that stage as much. So we're going to go over the first 3 stages, which is what most guys are really concerned about in the first place. And then if you want to brush up a little bit more, you can read into the Tao of Badass to get that information. So I'm going to go over what kinds of mindsets you need for these different areas of the map of interaction in order to touch in the perfect way so that you don't go too far or give the wrong signal or something, as you're doing this. So each one is very, very important. And as you go through these 3 different stages, it's important that you focus on the stage that you're in. If you're thinking about the next stage the entire time, you're never going to be fully there in that moment. And the problem with that isn't like some froofy, new age, oh, you got to be in the moment and be in the now. It's not like that. It's more like you're focusing on the next stage, and therefore you're acting out of the next stage, which means you're going too fast. And if you go too fast with a woman, you probably notice this if you've ever tried it before, you get rejected fast and hard. It hurts when you get rejected for going too fast because they have to push you off. Sometimes physically and sometimes just emotionally they push you away. And it's a really shitty feeling, a really bad thing to have to experience. So you have to focus on the stage that you're in, and it all starts with the stage of attraction. So the stage of attraction is the curiosity stage, the stage in the very beginning where you're basically in this stage with anybody you don't know yet, that you haven't talked to. You're already in the stage of attraction. And as you go through the material in the Tao of Badass, you'll learn that attraction really has nothing to do with sexuality. It has everything to do with curiosity. And so during the stage of attraction, how do you touch? How do you touch someone that will make them curious? How do you touch to make them want to know more? And the way that you do that is you create a sense of non-neediness around your touch. And the way that you can do that without having to think about what to do too much is to have the mindset of a boy or a child. Now, what I mean by boy is, you're a little kid. When you're touching, you're not touching like, you're not acting like a child necessarily, but you're touching with the mindset of a child. You're touching with the idea that, this is interesting because I'm curious about it for now, and then if I get distracted, I'll just go somewhere else, right? A kid doesn't necessarily need that stuff as much. They get distracted very easily. They get, you show them one thing, they can't have it, they cry for 5 minutes, then they want something else, and they forget about that other thing altogether. So there's this sense of non-neediness around this part of your personality, this boy part of your personality. And this is why a lot of women are attracted to sort of insecure or immature men at times, especially young women are attracted to insecure men. And the reason why is because they at least aren't trying to skip past this first stage. Attracting women is really one of the most amazing areas of study, because it's one of the only areas of our lives where, in order to be successful, all we really have to do is just not fuck everything up. And excuse my French there, but that's just the truth. And so as you learn these things and you know what not to do, you'll automatically see massive amounts of success with the women that you're interacting with. So the first bit here is to have the mindset of a boy. Now, what does that mean? It means non-needy. It means that when you're touching, the 1 to 3 second thing is you saying, I'm touching you, but I don't know you, so I don't need to keep touching you. I like doing it, but I'm not gonna freak out if you leave, right? And this is sort of the mindset for attraction altogether. I like this, but I don't need it, and that needs to be sort of drilled and burned into your brain as you learn this material, because that's the information you're trying to send across to someone else, to the woman that you're talking to. That I like this, but I don't need this. Again, a lot of guys overcompensate on this because they feel like they're too needy all the time. So what they do is they show, in order to show non-neediness, they show disinterest. So they won't touch, they won't be nice, they won't compliment, stuff like that. They're afraid they're going to come across as needy, and that ends up killing their game. They can't attract women that way. So, and by the way, I use game very lightly here. I don't mean that you're a pickup artist or anything. I just mean that, whenever you are attracting a woman, if you attempt to show her only that you don't need her, then you're going to overcompensate, and it's going to come across like you're really insecure and really mean, actually, to a lot of women. So non-needy is one of the ways. You don't want to try too hard to touch her for too long early on, because that shows neediness, because you're trying to push through the map of interaction too fast. Next, you're going to be playful with it. Think like actually think like you're younger. Think like you're a kid. Think like you're just having fun. High fives are a playful kind of touch. Putting your arm around somebody like they're just your friend, like your buddy, that's a playful kind of touch. So you want to be very playful with it, and your personality should go right along with this. Your personality should be playful and fun as well. And as you progress and as we go through this, you'll understand the mindset a lot more. But the mindset's very playful, and you have to touch in a very playful way as well. You have to have fun with it. You can't be too serious in the beginning of an interaction. Otherwise, you're not giving her the. It's not even just the opportunity. You're not giving her the privilege of seeing this fun side of you in the beginning, and not giving her the privilege of being curious about you and wanting to know more about you. And because you don't give her that privilege, she's not attracted to you because of that. So make sure your touch is very fun and light. So it takes me to the next one, lighthearted. Make sure it's not serious. If she starts to get serious, you're not going to get serious with her. You're going to be having a good time, and you're going to be very playful. Just little things that you might do with the kid that you're talking to. Like putting your finger on her nose for a second and just saying boop, things like that. That's a really lighthearted thing to do. It's a really lighthearted version of touch. I know it may sound kind of crazy to you don't just walk up to a girl you've never met before and honk her nose, obviously. But as you progress through this and you are talking to a woman, you want to make sure you have the same mentality. Like, that can't be out of the question for you. That has to be within your reality. You have to be able to do that. Not with every woman, but if you see the opportunity and you think it will be fun to do it, you have to feel like you can. And that's why you want to keep this lighthearted, and it's one of the major components to this. Next, when you get into the stage of rapport, you're in the connection stage. You're sort of in the serious stage now. If you skip the stage of attraction, you go straight to rapport, you'll fall into the friend zone immediately. So you really can't do that. You want to make sure you take a lot of time in the stage of attraction, and that you have you really just indulge yourself in that stage, because it's a really beautiful stage of the interaction. So rapport then is the connection stage. It's the stage where you actually have some content to your conversation, where most guys walk up to a girl they never met before and they say, you come here often. It's one of the classic crappy pickup lines, right? So do you come here often is a crappy pickup line because you're trying to go into rapport as soon as you meet somebody. You're trying to talk to her about something serious, about something like that you think you're going to connect with her on. It's not about connection in the beginning. She doesn't care about that. She doesn't know who you are. She doesn't want to talk to you yet. She wants to have fun with you first. She wants to be playful first. And you're going to give that to her in the attraction stage. But after you're done with that, and she starts to bring it to a serious note, then you're in the stage of rapport, and that's when a lot of the really fun stuff happens for me. So during the stage of rapport, you are going to have a mindset of a friend only. And I don't mean like a friend with benefits at this point. I mean, in the beginning, you are sort of dropping the thought that you're being playful, dropping the thought that she's hot and you want to sleep with her, and you're just focusing on being her friend. Now, the worst case scenario is at this point you realize A, she doesn't want to, she's not attractive anymore in your mind, or you don't really want to move it forward, or B, it could be that she doesn't want to move it forward. Maybe she has a boyfriend or something as well. So you want to, as you're going through that rapport stage, sort of keep an eye out for things like this. But the worst case scenario is that you actually are her friend after that, and then you have a hot friend who has hot friends of herself, of her own, that she can introduce you to. So I really compel you, and a lot of guys do this wrong. I think they try to go in for some kind of a close, like they try to seal the deal with a girl when they meet her, like in one night, and you can do that. It's one of the things you can learn how to do. It's not impossible, and it's not easy from the very beginning, but absolutely can learn how to do it. And of course, following some of the instructions that I teach, I'm sure you can. I've done it, a lot of times. I don't need to have a number for you, but I've done it a lot. But my sort of version of this is a lot more patient. I never really needed to sleep with a woman because I felt like I had options, and a guy who's really confident will feel like he has options. So if you want to really show that you are non-needy with a woman, you will show her that you have options. And one of the ways that you can show her you have options is if you don't need to sleep with her that night. You're okay just being her friend if that's how it is. It's not a big deal. So you have to let go of everything else. Forget the idea that you were thinking about sleeping with her. Forget the idea that you were having fun earlier and you're being playful. And now you're going to focus just on getting to know her. And a lot of guys either jump straight to this stage, or the guys who are a little bit better with women will skip this stage altogether, and then it all falls apart later on in the evening before they can actually get her to a place where they can get intimate with her. So this builds a lot of trust. So you want to have the mindset of a friend. What would I do for a friend here? A friend that's a girl, and that's what you'd be thinking about, not one of your buddies, when you're dude friends, because we harass those guys. They're the least lucky. So you want to have a very giving attitude. You want to share with her things that you want to give touch to her as like a gift. You want to be sort of consoling her if she's having a hard time, or it has to be very sort of understanding. It needs to be real. It needs to be something that is for you as you share it. It's like almost uncomfortable how real it is and how in your face it is. You want to feel like you are sharing with somebody something that you don't normally share, and she will pick up on that. And this is again, this is your mindset, so this will seep right into your touch, the way you're touching her. You have to be very engaging and focused, have very focused attention. A lot of my students in the beginning would not have the ability to focus and really give a woman full attention, and the ability to give a woman full attention whenever you're in rapport is what leads you into the later stages, the seduction stages, the stages where she's fully yours and she gives you all of her attention. So in order to do that, first you have to be very engaging during this stage. You have to be like a friend that's listening to someone else and is fascinated by what they're saying. Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, one of the key components there was that if you listen to people and you're genuinely interested in what they say, everybody will want to be around you, including women. So you want to be very engaging and very focused, have a very focused attention during the stage. And you have to be non-wanting. You don't want to want something from her. Again, this is sort of that non-needy concept again. But here, you have to be okay with whatever's currently going on, and you have to not be thinking about how do I get this to the next step. If you're thinking how do I get this to the next step, she's going to be reading that in your body language. Last week, I went over a concept that I thought was a really, really important concept that I really hope I can get to go over a little bit more in the future with you guys. And that is that as you're in a stage and as you are connecting with someone in that moment, women are reading your minds. They are reading your body language on a subconscious level, and they're reading your minds. And so if you're thinking, how do I get her in the bed, or how do I go to the next stage, she's going to be reading that on your body language. You're going to start acting that way. You're going to look in a certain direction. She's going to pick up on it. She's not going to know what it is that you're thinking, but she's going to have a gut feeling, and that gut feeling will kill the attraction. So you do not want that to happen. So you want to be very non-wanting in this stage. And again, understanding and very open to what she has to say. I mean, if she says that she kicks puppies and hates babies, then you have to be like, oh, well, tell me more about that. You know, you have to be able to be understanding of that and be open to it. So you want her to be able to spill her guts to you. You want her to be able to open up in a way that she's never opened up to another guy, especially a guy she's just met. And this is all going to be seeping into the way that you touch. And I'll go over exactly how to touch and where to touch in a bit. So next and finally is everyone's favorite stage, the stage of seduction. The stage of seduction, you're going to have the mindset of a man. And this is, I'm sure you know guys who are stuck in every single one of these different stages. I know guys who are stuck in attraction, where all they do is they're only playful all the time. They get really good. Girls are really attracted to them in the beginning, and then they lose that attraction almost immediately because they don't do anything else. I know guys that are only like the connectors, and all they want to do is walk up and really connect with a woman and like be their friends, and they get thrown in the friend zone over and over again, and they get stuck on the same woman forever, and they can't get over her. And then I know guys, a lot of guys who are stuck on the stage of like seduction, where they're being a man all the time. They come on too strong for a lot of women, and they just come across like dogs to women, and they try too hard, and women usually manipulate these kind of guys. So, but if you do it in the right order again, and you have a little bit of each one, you can do the right tool for the right job. And when you get to seduction, that's when you bring out your manhood, your powerful manhood, and that's sort of what I'm going to go over. You want to be powerful with your touch. You want to be strong with your touch. You want to be also playful again. So this is going to be interesting. This is interesting. It's a combination before of the playfulness you had during the attraction stage, and now sort of the power that you have in manhood. And again, you're going to be, at this point, it'll be very sexual touch. You're going to be touching her in places that she wouldn't normally let some random person she just met touch her. And touching her in a way, and talking to her in a way, and looking at her in a way that she wouldn't normally let someone touch her and look at her and talk to her in that way. So once you get past those stages, you're going to be sort of gifted this seduction stage. And from here, most of the fun happens, in my opinion. And you have to have this concept when you're touching. Sort of the key component is to be strong but soft. This is very, very crucial, and I'll go over this a little bit later. You want to have that firm, strong touch while you're sort of in seduction mode. So she should feel like you're strong, but you should not be hurting her. You should be sort of cradling her at times. When you pull her closer, it should be as though you're not squishing her when you're pulling her close. A lot of guys don't realize that they're a lot stronger than they think they are, and women have, women are very, very delicate and fragile. And if you pull one in, especially the women that you're going to be attracting, probably going to be very gorgeous and hot women, and that usually means that they're very thin, or thinner at least, and fragile in some kind of way. And so you can't start out by just ripping her towards you and stuff. What it shows her is that you're not used to dealing with women in a way that would make her feel safe, and so she won't be able to feel physically open to you. She'll feel like you're going to hurt her in bed, or you're not going to listen, or it's really scary for a woman to take a guy into her home and sleep with him, especially if she just met him. So you have to do all these things right. Now, basically, you want to give across the concept: I'm strong and you're fragile, so I'll choose to touch you softly. That's sort of the mantra. And again, that's softly. That's not I choose to touch you a lot, or I choose to touch you strong or angrily. Of course, it's softly. Softly, key component here. You want her to know that you're a strong man and physically stronger than her, so she'll absolutely be turned on by that thought that you're able to overpower her, but you're not going to overpower her. You're going to respect her boundaries, and you're going to touch her softly. So this time also your touch will give across this vibe of like being very desiring. You're going to want things in this stage. And essentially this is the first stage where in the interaction with a woman that you're actually going to be openly desiring and wanting her as a woman. So you've been, in the beginning, you're just kind of being playful. She doesn't know if you like her or not. then you're building rapport, you're making a connection with her, and then now once you've done both those things, you're allowed to, at that point, you're allowed to openly desire and want her. You're allowed to say, what you want to do to her. You're allowed to say what turns you on about her. You're allowed to say a lot of stuff now, but you have to work your way to that point. You have to earn the right to get to the stage of seduction with a woman, and touch, of course, is a very, very big component of that. So let's zoom around here. Let's go to my new big Circle O. This isn't really techniques here, but Circle O concepts here around touch. The first one I'm going to go over is the friend zone. The friend zone is, I think a lot of guys get really stuck on this, and I'm just going to speak about this for a moment. It happens because of two things. One is that guys skip the stage of attraction, which is what I talked about earlier. They go straight into friend mode. As you know, if you're in rapport and you're building a connection with a woman, your mindset is that of a friend. So if you jump straight to rapport and you skip the stage of attraction, then you are going to be obviously jumping straight into the friend zone with her because you're getting friendly and you're not building that curiosity. But another thing, and the other complete large component to this, the biggest component to this is touch. Is that if you do not bridge that gap early on in the interaction, that touch barrier, then you will get thrown into the friend zone every single time. It'll just happen later and later and later and later. You don't want to be that guy who's constantly waiting for a woman to make the move. You have to be able to take charge here. You have to be able to make the move with a woman and know confidently and for sure that she's not going to back away and reject you. So the friend zone is, I'd say, 70% touch, 30% skipping the stage of attraction. If you don't do both of them, then you're almost 100% going to go into the friend zone. And in case you don't really know what the friend zone is where you can't be more than just friends. You hear that "let's just be friends" speech from her, and it just is the worst thing in the universe. I've heard that several times, and God, it sucks. So whenever I figured out I finally broke down what it was that was actually causing that, I was really ecstatic, obviously, and I'm excited to be able to talk to you a little bit about that here in a bit on the different stages of where to touch and how to touch in order to attract a woman and get past the friend zone so that you can move forward into the interaction. So the next thing is bridging that gap. So in the beginning of an interaction, when you first meet a woman, you have to be able to touch her in a way that will make her feel comfortable. But how do you get from not touching a woman because you haven't met her yet to starting to touch her all of a sudden? Well, one way to do that is to use hand gestures. So what we do is there are actually a couple of barriers that we have to cross whenever we are going in to touch a woman in a casual way. The first barrier is one that we don't see. The second one is when we actually touch her and we look at her reaction and see if she's okay with it. But the first barrier is not about that. The first barrier is her space. We have to invade her space first in a way that she feels comfortable. When she feels comfortable with you invading her space without actually touching her, then you can move straight to touching her and it won't be a big deal. Hand gestures are one of the easiest ways to do that. So as you're talking, if you move your hands around a little bit while you're talking, you can create a really powerful and a simple doorway into a woman's touch zone, let's call it. Again, I'll go over more of this in the psychological space webinar, but for the hand gestures, for using hand gestures, essentially what you're doing is you are touching her without actually touching her. So you'd make the motion of touching her. You'd put your hand right near her as if you were going to touch her, but you didn't actually connect and make the touch. Now this is really important because what will happen is she gets alarmed in the beginning because you're making a move in physically. And then, of course, you want to move slowly, by the way. I didn't outline that in here. But you want to move slowly because if you move quickly, too fast, they're going to flinch and they're going to feel like they need to block themselves. So make sure you slow down your movements. In fact, slowing down your movements a little bit when you're talking to a woman will actually slow down your speech and vocal pattern too. If you're one of the guys like me that whenever he gets really nervous starts talking faster, then especially around women, when I was first starting out with this, I was very nervous and I'd speak very quickly around a woman. Well, my hands would start moving faster too. So whenever I started slowing my hands down, my hand gestures, then my speech started slowing down. My vocal tonality got sort of in the proper place. and I started to be able to attract about 100% more women than I was before, twice as many than I was before. So that's a really important one. But hand gestures, essentially, you're going to get your hand into a place in the middle of conversation. Like as I'm talking now, I'm sort of moving my hand forward as I'm speaking. And that's sort of what you do. It would be a normal kind of hand gesture. But what you're going to do is you're going to put this hand gesture in their psychological space. And in their psychological space essentially means somewhere kind of within touching distance of them, where you could touch them, but you don't do it. Maybe no closer than 6 inches or 5 inches from their actual body. And you're gonna put your hand there for a second, and then you're gonna take it away. You're not even gonna touch them at all. So that's sort of the hidden secret stage of touch that a lot of guys skip, and because they don't have this little, launch pad into the touch, the stages of touch that they really like, that they want to get to, because they don't have that, they don't ever get to the next stage of touch, which is actually being able to connect with them physically. So hand gestures can sort of bridge that gap for you, and you can make the transition into touching a lot easier and smoother that way. Next, I want to go over, let's see what we got, emotional anchoring. So emotional anchoring essentially speaks to the idea that as you're touching someone, one of the key components and one of the reasons why it's so important to touch someone is because when you touch, you anchor an emotion to yourself and to them. So what does that mean? Essentially that means there's a concept called neurolinguistic programming. It's an entire field of study. Some guys use neurolinguistic programming for motivation. Some people use it to take away your blocks of what may be like blocking you, to help you quit smoking or something. Some people use it to seduce, and I studied it for an obvious reason. I studied it for the latter of those three in the beginning, and then eventually spilled over into self-development. So I want to talk to you a little about anchoring, because anchoring is one of the key components of neurolinguistic programming, and it's how you use touch in NLP, or neurolinguistic programming, to draw up emotions in someone. So basically what happens is at certain key components, key times in the conversation with the woman, whenever she's feeling elated or happy or laughing, you want to make sure you touch her in a certain spot every time. So what you'll do is you'll subconsciously in her mind, she's associating this elated, funny laughter feeling with you touching her in this certain spot. So eventually what you can do is just by touching that spot, you will elicit that powerful positive feeling out of her anytime you want. And this is kind of a sneaky thing to do, so definitely pay attention to it. I don't teach stuff like this very often. So emotional anchoring, one of the best places to do this is your hand. Of course, you won't be able to touch your hand in the very beginning, so if you can't touch your hand, I would use her shoulder. Probably the safest place to touch a woman is her shoulder. Don't slap it, punch it, anything like that. But you're going to, every time that you get to the point where you just notice that she's laughing, the conversation's going well, you want to keep talking as you're touching her, but talk, and she's laughing, and touch her shoulder just briefly for a few seconds, and then take your hand off. And what eventually will happen is that you can touch your shoulder, and she'll start to laugh and be sort of having a good time and lighthearted. And that's what emotional anchoring will do. You can do this with anything. You can do this with a sexual feeling too, a feeling of desire. You can do this with we can do this with negative feelings as well. So you have to make sure you don't anchor any negative feelings. So if she's like going through something bad or having a bad time, you don't want to. When you first meet her, of course, not later on in the relationship. If you have a relationship with her, it's different. But when you first meet her, you want to emotionally anchor those negative feelings to something else, and then you can actually anchor an emotion to something physical outside of your body, like a wallet or like a sugar packet or a fork. So you can anchor it to something external, which is really amazing. So anyway, this is something just to play around with a little bit. Keep that in mind. If it comes to mind while you're interacting and talking to a woman, then go ahead and connect with her and go ahead and try and see if you can get this emotional anchoring down to the point where you actually can elicit the emotion from her. And it's a really phenomenal thing to learn how to do. The first time you do it effectively, you're going to be blown away. You're going to feel like you have freaking superpowers. I mean, it's going to feel like you're unstoppable from this stuff. It's a really cool thing to learn. And then, of course, you'll do other stuff after that, which will make that look kind of silly. So one of the key elements, I'd probably say if I had to tell you how to touch, some of the biggest mistakes to make in touch, this would be probably the first one, which is don't look at your hands. Don't look at your hands, and also don't look where you're going to touch. So if you look at your hands or you look where you're going to touch for an extended period of time and you don't talk during that time, this is creepy. Girls get really weirded out by this. Don't do this. I had to learn this the hard way. I don't know how I eventually came across it, but for me it was like trial and error when it came to touch because no one taught me. And so eventually I got enough concepts to learn some really cool things from some really advanced NLP teachers and things like this. And I studied with the longtime mentor of Tony Robbins, the guy who taught Tony Robbins all of his NLP and the things that made him a successful coach as well. And I studied under him as well. And a lot of stuff that he studied sort of plays into this idea that that you can touch, to learn how to touch properly. So one of the things that I think is really crucial is not looking where you're going to touch and not looking at your hand while you're touching. Guys who start out with this, it's really common that you will go to touch a woman and you'll be thinking about it so much that you'll actually be looking at your hand as you move it over, and then you're going to look at her in the face to see if she freaks out. If you do this, she will freak out. If you don't do this, you'll find that she doesn't freak out. Even though you do the exact same movement, you touch her in the same spot, she's not going to freak out. Why? Because she thinks that you're used to this. If you don't look at your hand and you don't look at where you're going to touch. But if you do look at your hand and you do look at where you're going to touch, she thinks you're just trying this out and you're not actually good at this. And so she's going to think, since you are hesitating, that she should be reserved and she shouldn't move forward with this. I mean, I've used these touch concepts to do crazy stuff. I mean, I've to the point of having a girl grab my hand and stick it up her shirt on her raw breasts and I just met for the very first time, not a minute into the conversation, by being playful and doing this. So I know it sounds nuts, and I've told you a couple of crazy things that I've done today. I don't normally go into these, or springboard into these stories in the middle of a course, but I really want to show you what is possible with this. And I know it may seem kind of crazy, but you're going to learn how to do that yourself. And by following these rules, as you start to do it, just trust me and try it out, and you'll see amazing results from it. So again, key component, don't look at your hands, and also don't look where you're going to touch. So now let's see, we're going into, okay, good. So we're going to be focusing the touch with the palms of your hands and not with your fingers. So not with your fingers. Why is that? Well, because if you are focusing the touch, like the basis of your touch, with the palm of your hands and not your fingers, then you're giving her a flat touch. If you focus the touch with your fingertips and you put your palm and you squeeze with your fingers, you're going to end up grabbing her, and you can actually hurt a woman doing this. It may not seem like it's a big deal or something you don't want to focus on, but if you hurt her once physically on accident, you are done. It's over. You're done. Game over for you. You're not moving you're not going forward in any kind of way. You're not passing go. You're not collecting $200. Nothing's happening here, So it's really, really crucial that you just focus the touch with the palms of your hands, or if, and I didn't say this here, when I say not your fingertips, I mean not your palm and your fingertips. If you just use your fingertips and you do it very lightly, then you can create a really sensual sensation for them, a really sensual experience for them, and that's really cool, and I'll go over to that in a bit here. But again, not too much, not with let me see if I sorry, I'm jumping back and forth here. Let me make sure that I don't I'm not skipping anything. Yeah, okay, good. We're good. Okay, so now I want to go over something that I think is probably the coolest component of what I have, and that is called the touch guide. It's also called the 1 through 5 guide. I have the same thing for negative body language, and you'll see it whenever I go over negative body language. You definitely want to jot this down. I'll see if I can add it in later on in the replay for download, so you can download this and have it yourself. But very, very crucial concept. Basically, it shows you the 3 different stages, the 3 different types of touch, and then it tells you where you can touch them and how you touch them. So this is a quick guide for you with touch. In fact, if you get this down, I would suggest that you fold it up and keep it in your pocket anytime that you go out. I know it sounds kind of strange, But if you do that and you sort of forget later on, you can always look back at it and you can pull it out and you can check it out and you can go, okay, cool. In between talking to one girl and talking to another, you can just pull it out, check it out, and make sure you're touching in the proper way. But here it is. During the stage of attraction, again, temporary touch is 1 to 3 seconds max. You want to be light and easy, playful and fun, like I went over earlier. And you want to touch on the upper outer arm, so like between your elbow, between her elbow and her shoulder, also on her shoulders, and then her upper back, not her lower back yet, but her upper back. These are the safest places to touch in the beginning. You can put your arm around her like she's a friend, like kind of an arm around her shoulders, but don't put your arm around her neck like you have her in a headlock. Very crucial. I've seen a lot of guys screw this up. In fact, I've screwed this up a lot where I pull a girl in thinking that I could do that and not like get her in a headlock, but pull her in a little bit too hard, and she would have that look on her face like, ow. And as soon as I saw that look on her face, I knew that it was done, and I screwed up, and I just apologized. And from then on, she's like, what's wrong with you? What, you're trying to hurt me, blah, blah, I'm leaving. And then I was like, shit, I screwed it up again. So I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to have to experience that. So, stick to the outer upper arms in the beginning for 1 to 3 seconds, the arms for 1 to 3 seconds, and the upper back, the shoulder for 1 to 3 seconds, and the upper back for 1 to 3 seconds as you're talking to her. Again, in the beginning of an interaction, it's really good to be standing shoulder to shoulder with somebody. Not fully shoulder to shoulder, but at least a little bit, maybe like at a 90-degree angle. I hope that makes sense. So if you had an aerial view of the two of you, one would be facing one way, and then at a 90-degree angle, you'd be standing there. So she'd be standing, and then your shoulders would be almost touching on one area, but you'd still be kind of facing each other. Not facing in the same direction, just kind of facing a central area. And that's a really powerful place to stand, because from there you can touch your shoulders, you can touch your upper back, you can touch your outer arm, you can put your arm around her, and all that stuff is basically set up for you. If you're on a date with a girl and you want to be able to touch her, you have to sit close enough to her so you don't have to lean across the table to touch her. This is something that a lot of guys don't even think about. It's a logistical issue that guys just slips their mind. So what happens? Well, they don't get to build that, break that, go past that touch barrier, and of course, at the end of the date, they end up either just going home and having a really awkward maybe kiss and never hearing from them again, or the date doesn't even end. It doesn't even progress any further. They get pushed into the friend zone immediately. So next we have the rapport stage, the lingering touch, 3 to 5 seconds max. Max, you don't want to go any more than that. Soft and caring at that time, understanding, comforting. And at this point, you're touching her hands, which may sound scary, but once you've got that attraction built, it won't seem scary at that point to touch her hands. It'll seem natural. Her low back, and actually her face at this point. Now, when I say her face, I should probably throw in a disclaimer there. I don't mean you're like grabbing her face or anything. Again, you're using this sort of soft and caring touch, so you can actually push and brush hair out of her face. You can touch the back of her neck a little bit up by the root of her hair. And again, one of the things that I used to do that was a really powerful jump from rapport to seduction. Probably the hardest jump to make in an interaction is going from being that sort of connecting, friendly kind of person to jumping over to being a man and being sexually attractive to her. And one of the ways I would do that is while I was connecting with her in this rapport stage, I would say, let me try this with you real quick and see how this feels. And I would reach my hand up to the back of her neck and ride it up her neck. So my fingers were actually facing the top of her head. So I'd start with just below, and I'd reach up as if I was going to grab her hair. And sort of at the very root of her hair, I would grab it sort of not super tight, just a little bit. So I had control of her head. And I pulled her head back slowly so she had to tilt her head up. This is a trigger that will trigger sexuality in every woman you ever do it to. If you do it too soon, though, then you can't. Instead of triggering sexuality, it'll trigger aggravation. So you have to do this at the tail end of the stage of rapport. So you can actually touch her face at that stage. You can touch the back of her neck. You can touch her low back as well, and keep your hand there for 3 to 5 seconds. And then you can touch her hands as well, and make good use of that. Definitely touch her hands. You don't have to hold her hand, but because if you hold her hand, you're going to be holding it for more than 3 to 5 seconds. And in this stage, it's really important that I note that you can continue to touch for longer than 5 seconds in rapport. But if you do that, she's not going to want you to touch her as much because you're not taking it away. At this point, you want her to want it. You want her to be like, oh, I want him to touch me again. I want him to be all over me now. If she starts to think that, then you can do that. If not, then you have a really hard time doing that. So the ultimate point here is that you want to get her to want you to touch her. And during this rapport stage, the reason why 5 seconds max is there is so that you know not to go beyond that, so that she still wants you to touch her. And then finally, in the stage of seduction, you're on constant touch at that point. That's when you're always touching. It's sort of heavy and passionate. You may be dragging your hand from one place to another. Definitely palm heavy, pulling her in toward you, and just being very powerful and manly during that time. It's, like I said, you can touch everywhere that is appropriate for a public setting, and probably some places that aren't appropriate for a public setting. I've done lots of things that are not appropriate in public, so don't let that stop you either. But anyway, so that's. By the way, I should throw in sort of a legal disclaimer in there that if you do get arrested for heavy petting in public, that I don't want you coming back to me for it. I guess it's a high quality problem though at the end of the day. So if you are getting in trouble for doing that, at least it's happening often. So anyway, yeah, that's sort of the touch guide. I want you to make sure you have this down, and again, print it out or jot it down and keep it in your back pocket just in case, or in your wallet or something, just in case you need to touch up on it later. And remind yourself randomly so that you can sort of stay on top of it. Next, I want to sort of go back to the big circle O concept, and I want to give you a technique. This is one of my favorite techniques. Probably my favorite technique when it comes to touch. Besides in my mind the reaching behind and grabbing the hair and pulling it back, which has worked for me 9 times out of 10 to jump from rapport to that seductive state. It's a really easy way to transition. This is another one. This is a really cool one. This is called the scale of 1 to 10 touch technique. And basically what you do here, and I forgot where I learned this technique, but it's essentially another concept of NLP. What you're doing is you're going to be setting a boundary or a flat concept or a flat association with a certain type of touch, and then you're going to escalate from there openly in conversation. So I should probably just jump right into it. What you should actually say to a woman in order to make this happen. So what you're going to say is you're going to say something to the effect of, hey, maybe you could answer this. Tell me how this feels. Or maybe you could maybe tell me how you feel about this. Or tell me how this feels for you. Or let me do this something real quick and tell me how it feels. So basically you're going to lead in with that really simple, hey, maybe you could answer this. Tell me how this feels for you kind of statement. Really simple. And then what you're going to do is you're going to say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how does this feel? And then you're going to touch her lightly with your fingertips on her outer upper arm, just for a couple seconds. A scale of 1 to 10, how does that feel? She'll say something like 5, right? Because it feels good, but it doesn't feel like 10, right? So what she's doing, and this is kind of interesting, she's now setting a numerical value to your touch. I'll tell you why that's important. As you escalate this, if touching her on the arm with your fingertips is a 5, then, kissing you is going to be like 100, on a scale of 1 to 10. And that's really what you want to get her at. You want her to start thinking about this and sort of calibrating how good this touch feels for her. And as time goes on, you should be able to escalate to the point where she's just completely overwhelmed by your touch in a really positive way. So that you're just touching her, her arm at that point, or just touching her hands, or her face, or the inside of her elbow. It's called your hinge on your elbow, which is a very sensitive area. So you're gonna do that first. On a scale of 1 to 10, how does this feel? She'll say 5, or even if she says 1, it doesn't matter, right? But usually they'll say somewhere around 5 or 6, just to let you know that it feels good. And then you go, okay, well, how about this? And then from there, you're going to, scratch her head or something very lightly. Scale of 1 to 10, how does this feel? And she'll say, oh, that's an 8, or that's a 9, And then you're going to say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how does this feel? And you're going to start lightly sort of very lightly brush with your fingertips the inside of her elbow. So the outside of her elbow has very few nerve endings, and the inside of her elbow will have a lot of nerve endings. In fact, you can take the skin on the outside of her elbow and you can pinch it as hard as you want, and you'll barely feel it. Doesn't really hurt because you don't have a lot of nerve endings out there. For some reason, I don't know why we don't have a lot of nerve endings on our elbow. So, but the inside of your elbow, the hinge part of your elbow, that has a lot of nerve endings. So you're going to say, eventually you're going to say on a scale of 1 to 10, how does this feel? And you're going to lightly brush over the inside of her elbow. And she's going to say, that feels like a 9 or a 10, right? So then at that point, you just leave it alone. You're done. You can continue with the touch. You can continue with the interaction. Just go, okay, cool. I was just curious about that. Anyway, blah, 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 and keep talking to her. So what this does is it sets a calibration for her. It sets a sort of standard for her that as you move forward and as you become sexual with her, and that feeling of the sexual touch or sexual interaction with somebody is so much more pleasurable than someone brushing the inside of your elbow, that she's going to have a mental and emotional association that's far beyond what she would have had otherwise. And that is sort of the point of this scale of 1 to 10 touch technique. So again, hey, maybe you could answer this. Tell me how this feels. And then you touch her and scale on a scale of 1 to 10. How does this feel? And that's the level which you're gonna do that. Another really playful touch idea, and I do have a question, so I'll answer that in a moment. But a really playful touch idea is the concept of actually playing thumb war with somebody. Thumb war is just something you do when you're a kid. 1, 2, 3, 4. I declare thumb war. If you haven't done that, there's always some kind of like thumb wrestling game or hand game that you play whenever you're a kid. And what this does is it playfully breaks. Say you're talking to a girl, it's going well, but you're just like you're afraid that you're about to run out of shit to say, and it's not going to be fun after that, and she's going to be bored or she's going to leave. So what do you do? Well, there's a couple things you can do. One is you can launch into the scale of 1 to 10 touch technique, and another one is you can jump into a thumb war. It may sound kind of simple and silly, but and it is kind of silly, but it works very well. It will allow her to feel like she's more comfortable connecting with you. And again, by the way, you do want to actually win this thumb war, so you're not just going to do it and then lose and not worry about it. You're actually going to try to win the thumb war. So keep that in mind, and don't go crazy or anything. But if you have to cheat, then you have my permission to cheat here. So anyway, thumb war is really, really cool way of breaking that touch barrier in a way that allows you to actually hold her hand for an extended period of time without it being awkward or weird. And essentially, all of the concepts of touch are about you touching her in a way that's not awkward or weird. And that's basically what you're going to be focusing on. As you move forward, attention, where you focus your attention, and I kind of went over this a little bit in the coursework last week for eye contact, where you focus your attention is where she will focus her attention. This is the classic concept of a magician, that if they look in some direction, then everybody else looks in that direction too. Which is how come they're able to trick you into doing stuff, or trick you into thinking stuff that's not really real. They'll look at one hand, and the other hand they're doing something, but we can't draw ourselves to look into the other hand. Why? Because we follow people. They're leading us, and if they're looking in one hand, we are doing the same thing subconsciously. We can't help it. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be directing your attention at something else as you're touching, so they're not looking at or thinking about your touch. They're just experiencing it, and that's essentially the place that you want them to get to. Next week, we're going to be going over negative body language, another really key component in the 5-week body language mastery training course. I'm going to go ahead and take some questions now. It was really great talking about touch today, and I hope that I can get to everyone's questions here. I have a few of them lined up already, and I probably won't be able to get to all of them, but I'll just pick a couple. And it was really obviously my pleasure to be able to teach you this stuff. If you have any questions whatsoever, you can feel free to comment as well on this video. This when this is replayed, which you'll see, you can comment below, and I will actually come back to that page. I'll see that you comment. I get notified when comments are posted, and I'll come back and I'll actually have a conversation with you about the different stuff that's going on, the different concepts or questions you may have. So I got a question here. Okay. Okay, yeah. So Franklin asks me, when you're doing this, and he's referring to the scale of 1 to 10 touch technique. When you're doing this, he said should you still be looking in that place, or is this should you not be looking at that place, or is this the exception? That's a really great question. I would test this two ways. I have tested this two ways. One is looking at that part of her arm, and the other is looking at her. Now, certain women will respond to certain different reactions. If you're looking at her arm as you're doing this, women who are sort of shy will react better to you looking at her arm. And the reason why is because she'll feel open to sort of freely express how she feels, and then the sensation that she has by you just looking at her, the inside of her arm. And if you look at her directly, if she's shy, sorry, just one second, I got distracted there. If you look directly at her and she is shy, then she will automatically sort of repress what she's feeling, repress her delight, her excitement around this touch, and she'll automatically tone it down as well. And you don't want that to happen. You want her to feel free. So if she's like a really open and talkative person, then feel free to look at her face and look directly at her eyes as you're doing it, and sort of have that like power, that like I'm causing this feeling to you. I mean, really think about I'm causing this sensation, and sort of bring that to her. Let her know that's what you're thinking. And if you think that in your head, that's what she'll definitely know that. So definitely focus at that. And if she's open, but if she's not open and kind of reserved and kind of quiet and shy and introverted in a sense, then you want to look at the hinge of her arm or wherever you're touching, doing the 1 through 10 a scale of 1 to 10 touch technique. And yes, Franklin, that is an exception to that rule. You can actually do that. That's a really, really good point, and I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to go ahead now and open this up to anybody who may have a question. If anybody does, you can feel free to do that. You can just raise your hand or do whatever to let me see that. I will be replaying this. Let me see if I have anybody else on here that I may want to go through here. I'm just going to ask a couple people one at a time here and see if I'm just going to randomly call people out and see if we can get some questions here. We have a guy named Michael Finch. Michael, are you there? I know you're there, actually. I can see you. But if you have any questions at all, if you could, go ahead and type a question into the question section, and I'll answer it. Yeah, okay, so it says you do. Cool. All right, so go ahead and why don't I do this? Do you mind if I unmute you? Go ahead and send me a message and let me know if I can unmute you there. And we can just have a conversation as long as you don't mind everyone else hearing. You have no mic. Okay, cool. So go ahead and type your question, and I'll answer that. Anybody else who has a question too, you can feel free to type that in, and I'll get to you as well. But I'll wait for Michael, and then I see Franklin's got another question that I'll get to him about. So I'll just wait for that. I'll take a drink break here. All right. Okay, here we go. Okay, good. It's a really good question, Michael. All right, so Michael's asking if in this, for the scale of 1 to 10 technique, is this done during attraction, the stage of attraction, or is this done during the stage of rapport? This is best done during the stage of rapport. It's a really good question, because if you do it too early in the interaction, you won't get the kind of reactions that you probably want from the woman. So get much, much better reactions from the woman that you're doing this with if you do it during the stage of rapport, when you're actually connecting with her. And the reason why is because this is a really smooth transition, again, into that sexual state with a woman. So you want to make sure that as you do this, and as you make this connection with her, and as you do this this scale of 1 to 10, that she has at least the thought in her mind that she could become sexual with you at some point. Because if she doesn't have that thought already, then she will have it shortly thereafter, after you start doing this. So really crucial concept, and really great question, Michael. Thanks for asking that. And definitely try to stick to the stage of rapport. You can actually have it spill over into the stage of seduction if you want. If you really want to be playful and take the touch away a little bit, you can do it there too. So I'm going to actually unmute Franklin here in a second. So Franklin, let me unmute you if that's okay with you. Here we go. Can you hear me, Franklin? That's a really good question. It's a really good point, really, that I hadn't touched on yet. So I'll definitely talk about that. So I'm not very tall either. That's something that I had to sort of play around with too. Plus, I'm really thin, so I'm like really skinny, and so I had to sort of find my space here of being able to be playful in a way that was still, not didn't make it seem like I was a little kid, and like totally harmless. I didn't want to seem like I was a harmless guy. I wanted to seem like I was being playful and fun and silly with them in that moment. But I had another side to me that they would be curious about seeing. So I don't think, by the way, but I think that the way you're putting this, and to answer your question, that I personally think that no, I don't think you should be less playful. And I think that the only person who's thinking about that is you when you go out. And I think that what will happen is if you're thinking about not being as playful because you are, you consider yourself to be shorter than some of the guys in the bar, then you're going to overcompensate, and that's not going to come across in an attractive way. So you really want to find the middle ground here. But I would push your boundaries. I mean, everyone's different, and I would push your boundaries to the point where you are being so playful that you get a negative reaction. And whenever that happens, then you back it down from there a little bit. Instead of sort of bouncing back and sort of compensating the other way, I would do it that way. I would have it so that, you go so playful to the point where you are, it's actually negatively affecting you, and then you step it down a couple of notches from there, and then keep it at that point. I mean, I had a while where I was like, I had two really embarrassing things happen to me. I'm going to go ahead and mute you, though, and finish this. Is that okay, Franklin? 'Cause I'm getting some feedback, so I'm going to go ahead and mute it. But I had two really embarrassing things happen whenever I first started doing this. One was that I went and I was like being over the top, like energetic and fun when I first started. And I had a guy in the bathroom once. So I was going to the bathroom, and a guy in the bathroom come up to me and go, "Hey, man, so can I get some Coke?" And I was like, "What? What are you talking about? Do I look like a Coke dealer? I mean, is that what I look like?" And he's like, "Well, you're obviously on some right now." And I'm like, "No, I'm not on Coke right now." And he's like, "Oh," he didn't believe me. He's like, "Dude, just give me some. I'll buy it from you." I'm like, "God, man, no, I'm sorry." So as soon as I heard that, I was like, "Oh shit, this is not the kind of thing I want to give across to people." So I toned it back a little bit from there. And another thing that I got was I had a lot of women thinking that I was gay in the beginning, because I would, I'd be really playful and fun, and no straight guys are that playful and fun. So I had a thing I would say, and it was just awesome. It worked so well. Anytime someone ever asks you that when you're being playful, "Are you gay?" or asks if you're gay, instead of being offended, whatever, just say the following phrase: "Do I kiss like a gay guy?" That's all you have to say. "Do I kiss like a gay guy?" and then go in for a kiss. And I swear to God, it'll work 9 out of 10 times. It's mind-blowing. I've used this so many times. It's amazing. Really, really, really funny. So do I kiss like a gay guy, if you ever get that. So no fear there. Just go in and be as playful as you want to be in different situations. I got another question here from Philip. A couple parts, it looks like. One is, okay, so he's asking, if you talked about bars, what about touch in other environments besides bars, like bookstores and maybe cafes and stuff? Well, that's a really important concept, because when I'm talking about being high energy and stuff, you really only want to go in just being slightly higher energy than the group that you're going in to talk to. So you don't want to go in super high energy into a place or group with people who are kind of quiet and low energy. You want to go in just slightly above where they are. So if you're in a bookstore or a bar, or in a bookstore or a cafe or someplace like that, touch is the same in all of them, but the level of playfulness and the level of rapport will be different. So in a bookstore, you're going to be playful in the beginning, but you're not going to be loud and playful. You're not going to be as energetic. You're going to move slower. You're going to be looking a lot more directly in her eyes. You're not going to be using as much, and we'll get into negative body language next week, but you're not going to be using as much negative body language where you're turning away as well, and I'll tell you exactly how to do that. So if it's a lower energy environment, then you're going to tone yours down some, but you're still going to be just as playful, and you're still going to touch just as much, if not maybe even more, in a bookstore and in a cafe, because in that environment, it's a safer environment because it's usually daytime. So they're going to feel like, okay, well, he probably doesn't think that this is going to lead to sex. Women have their guards down in situations like that. So, you will be able to get in there, and you'll be able to sort of draw out of her a lot more safe reactions than you would at nighttime. You don't have to sort of hit as many barriers. Another question you have is, what about touch in a different time frame or limitations? So I'm guessing, Philip, that you mean by this, What if you don't have a lot of time to touch? Is that what you're asking? I'm not really clear on that question, so maybe you could clarify that for me. You said it's what about touching different time frame limitations here? I'm guessing you mean like in the bus, train. Okay, gotcha. So like a grocery store in line or something. Always start at the same level. Always start with temporary touch, and do this with everybody you meet everywhere. So I mean everybody, dude friends of yours you can do this with, because you're not being weird. It's just like you're touching just like you would a buddy of yours. Guys, you might slap a little harder on the shoulder or whatever. But you want to get to the mindset and the point where you are just the kind of guy that touches people when you talk to them in a comfortable way, but you just do that. That's what you do. So when you think that way, it's the same kind of touch in the beginning everywhere. And what you're doing is you're starting with temporary touch, and you're gauging her receptiveness to that temporary touch. If she's not receptive whatsoever to temporary touch, you back off and you start with the hand gestures, and you go back to the hand gestures again, where you're just invading her personal space a little bit with your hands every once in a while. And when she's cool with that, then try, as you're talking, and again, this is all as you're having a conversation, then you try going in and touching temporarily every once in a while as well. So really good question. And then one more question here. I think I only have time for one more. If you do have a question, though, you can go ahead and write it now, and I may have time for it, but I probably only have time for one more question here. Philip, you had another one, so I'm going to go ahead and finish this one off. Is there a way to use touch to interrupt her, like if she has her headphones on or if she's reading a book? Yes, but don't do it. There are lots of ways to do that. The safest way to do it, if you are going to use touch to get someone's attention, is as soon as you touch her, touch her on the shoulder lightly, and then as soon as you touch her, face in the same direction as her and point off somewhere. Now, this sounds kind of weird, but you're basically like you're going to be pointing at something in the same direction that you're both looking at this point. So you both turn, you touch her, she takes her headphones off, and she's kind of startled, right? But if you're facing her right there, she'll have to back away, right? You don't want her to have to back away. So you touch her, and then right as she's taking her headphones off and turning around to look at you, you're going to be turning as well the same direction she's looking, and you're going to be pointing at something and leaning sort of toward her and looking at off in the distance. Now, usually some way to do this is to go up. I've actually walked up to women, and I swear to God I've done this. I'd touch them, and they were distracted. They'd turn around, and I'd turn and point, and I'd point at something, and I was pointing at nothing. And I'd be like, hey, I'm pointing somewhere else. And I go, you look really cute over here, so I thought I'd come over here and say hi. And then I turned around and looked at her, and she was like, hey, well, thank you. What's your name? Blah, blah, blah. So what I did is essentially I just don't want her to have that gut reaction in the beginning of like, who are you? What are you doing here? Am I in danger? Should I leave? Can I trust you? You don't want her to have those thought processes. So I would turn, I would point, and then I would turn back around, and I would be saying something that had nothing to do with what I was pointing at. Nothing at all. So definitely a really good way to interrupt someone, interrupt her and get her attention. But again, you have to misdirect your attention too. You have to sort of turn it and face it somewhere else, sort of redirect that energy somewhere else into a different direction. Okay, last question here. I'm going to get into this one, and then I have to split because it's already been an hour and a half. It's been a really great webinar, though. Thanks, guys, a whole lot. It's been really fun. The last question is it okay to give girls the sort of buddy shoulder pat when trying to give temporary touch? It is, but anytime you do something that is sort of buddy-buddy with a woman, you're automatically setting yourself up to go into the friend zone. Because it's not that she's going to want to put you in the friend zone at that point. She's gonna think that you want to put her in the friend zone at that point, and that's gonna force her to start to reconsider whether or not she should even go for you, or she should be attracted to you, or whether or not you're gonna be attracted to her. And so you can do the sort of buddy shoulder pat, but do it in sort of a silly way, like a sarcastic kind of way. Like if she says something that doesn't make any kind of sense, or like she's like talking to you and she starts to fumble with something, or like says the wrong word and starts laughing, you can do sort of the buddy shoulder pat and just go, it's a good thing you're hot, or I'd have to leave, just joking around with her. And you can do that, but make sure it's a joke. Make sure it's not like a serious, like, hey, what's going on, buddy? That's a little bit too aggressive for women. It's not the same thing. You do it for guys, but you don't do it for women. So definitely a really good question. Thank you so much for that question. That's a really good one. And Franklin, send me some props here. So thanks, Franklin. I appreciate that. It's my pleasure to give and Michael too. Thank you very much for giving me props, man. Thanks for that. And I really appreciate being able to have this time to be able to show you guys this stuff. So I'm here for you as you learn this, and since you're one of the lucky people who got to get on this 5-week body language mastery course, whether you got it straight up or you got it as part of a bonus package, depending. I'm really happy to be here teaching you. So any questions you may have, any sort of direction, any feedback you have, email me at joshua@thedaoofbadass.com, and I'll get that directly. It goes straight into my inbox. I won't be able to respond to everybody, but I'll respond to as many as I can. And any kind of feedback is great. So, last week someone asked me to take a break in the middle, and I didn't do that. So, sorry about that. So, but you will be able to replay this later, so it's not that big of a deal. Again, thanks guys very much. It's been my pleasure and an honor to be able to be here to sort of be the person to help you get to sort of usher this knowledge to you. And I'm fully devoted to helping you along the way. So, thanks again, and I will see you next week, where we're going to be talking about negative body language, and every week following that. And again, I have the option for, and this really depends on everyone's involvement, the option for a bonus week that I'm thinking about throwing on. I have an idea about what I want to talk about, but I really have to see a lot of engagement and a lot of questions. And like, this is really great having a back and forth to make sure I know that everyone's really interested. So if we get there and I feel good, I may have a couple of contests in the meantime to get some guys, maybe have a survey that you guys can fill out, so that if I get a certain number of surveys back, then I'll do that bonus one. So I'm not going to tell you what it's about. It's a surprise, but it's one of the areas that if I had to say there were 5 pillars of sex appeal, this would be if I had to say there were 6 pillars of sex appeal, this would be the 6th one. This is the sort of forgotten pillar of sex appeal. So really, really cool, and I'd love to teach it. So I definitely want to get more of this interaction. So thanks guys very much, and I'll see you all next week, same time.